And my talk is maybe a little bit different, but I guess Michelle's talk was like a great entry point for this one, because I'm going to talk about these AI entities, and you showed some robots here, so now I'm actually going to talk about the physical robots, the embodied AI, so that's, yeah, quite a good follow-up. So in my talk, I just want to explore the different scenarios, challenges, and opportunities in using social robots in education. I have been leading a communications lab at my university where we have different robots, different physical robots, and we use them in different educational scenarios, but also in caregiving scenarios. And I want to share some of our experiences, but also some of the research done elsewhere. And this topic, social robots with AI, has been the key topic of this year's Robot Philosophy Conference, last year's Robot Philosophy Conference. And what has been discussed nowadays is that because robots offer multimodal interaction opportunities, there are also ways to apply or deploy different multimodal AI types on the educational robots to support humans in everyday life, but also in education. And it's still a matter of discussion and negotiation. What's the role of the robot could be in the classroom, and how do we want to engage these entities as part of the entire setup? So what are social robots? There are, of course, different definitions, but usually these two are quite popular. These are technologies that model people in social and cognitive ways to interact with them. And they are physically embodied, so they interact with physical spaces. So sometimes when we think about AI, it's a little bit like an elusive concept, because how does the AI actually look like? We have this interface, we have this something behind it, and once we apply a social robot, it becomes all tangible, and like we can actually see the robot, for example, speak through ChatGPT and actually be somehow human-like in their mimics, in how they pronounce the words, in how they speak, how they gesture, and so on. So it's becoming a tangible way, an interface basically for tools like, for example, ChatGPT or other large language models. So how do these robots look like? Maybe you have seen some of them we have in our lab. For example, the Furhat robot is quite nice to actually apply in large language models, because it's a conversational interface where we can have quite human-like or natural-like dialogues. Other robots look a little bit like toys, but they're quite popular in primary or secondary education. Some robots like Pepper you have seen in museums or in hotel lobbies and so on. So they have been applied in different contexts. So why social robots? So there are many different studies showing, of course, different things. They are not quite conclusive if robots are better than just simply using AI. But for sure, what I can also say from our own experience is that the social robots allow us to have the focus of the students and the teachers in a physical room. So a lot of times we see students just disappear somewhere in an online world, right? We don't know what they're doing, they're just somewhere using different tools, being in a virtual way, in a virtual world. When we apply a robot in the classroom, it's actually coming back together to the physical room, actually interacting with tangible technologies that we can see, observe, also manipulate and learn to program. So there have been studies that show that physical robots have advantages, for example, compared to just simply AI agents or any virtual agents that are on the screen. Also for learning gains and learning outcomes, including motivation, social, emotional learning benefits, and engaging in a physical space with other students or peers. So we have also done one study where we compared different robots as interfaces for ChatGPT, and it has been quite an interesting study, because we have discovered that how different robots actually appear or are perceived by humans. The humans can imagine using these robots more or less as interfaces for ChatGPT. And one of the features that was a key feature that emerged from the study is the sociability of the robots. So if the robot's design is perceived by humans as sociable, meaning the robot is perceived as a kind of sociable agent similar to a human, then students can imagine using this interface for ChatGPT. If it's not sociable, then they would not like to use it. So that's quite an interesting thing on how to design the robots and which robots to use. And in our case, it was the Pepper and the Now robots, so this was the C and D that appeared most sociable over the other ones. But there are, of course, many different ways on how we can design and classify social robots. It's not only about their appearance, it's also about other things, about their autonomy, for example, versatility, adaptiveness. So there is a classification framework for social educational robots. As you can see here, there is no robot, relaxed definition, and a standard definition of a social educational robot, which is the green one. And in this framework, you can see that usually social educational robots would be 3D in design, they would be anthropomorphic, they will be abundant, have many modalities, have a physical or allow for a physical interaction, and would shape learning and have some educational role and be usually used in a formal education. And the definition also says that these robots would be not only embodied and interactive, but also intelligent, meaning applying some form of artificial intelligence, and also be programmed in a way to follow some social norms. So when we engage in the classroom, the robots have to be programmed to have or embody the social norms, obey the social norms that are typical for a classroom, or for example, at a school or university and so on. And of course they would have an educational purpose. So the robots can be used in different ways in education. They have been used as tutors, as peers, as tutees, so we can also use a robot to actually teach them something, which is just learning by teaching method, right? Which has been also quite popular in using social educational robots. There have been quite a few studies so far done in social robots in education, depending on the type of participants, type of education, age, the type of instruction, the subject, but also the robot role and the type of interaction, which you can just see over here. So there's quite some research going on there. One interesting way of looking at social robots is also their dual role in education. They can be used as a didactic tool, for example, to teach about using AI or program a robot and through this learn programming skills. But the social robots can also be used as social agents, for example, not replacing but supplementing the teacher, acting as a peer or some kind of facilitator, moderator in the classroom. And in this way, focusing on the emotional, motivational, and social aspects of learning. We have also done one study where we had a scenario where a robot was applied as a Scrum Master to facilitate a daily Scrum meeting so that students could learn how it works in practice. And some of the students were in the classroom and some were actually participating online in a hybrid setting. And what we found out that even the students that were only participating online, not co-located in the same physical room with a robot, they could develop some kind of rapport with the robot. So it was quite interesting to observe that even in this form of participation, there is some kind of rapport with this physical identity as a robot that interacts in space. So like I mentioned, the interesting thing now about social robots is that we can apply different multimodal AI forms. So they can be related not only to speaking and using large language models or communicating through text with the robot, for instance, using tablets, but also about their gaze, facial expression, gesture, moving in space, their voice, the other sounds they are making. So there are many different developments in this area. So let's have a look at some of the examples on how large language models are used, but also voice and sound generation, gesture, face generation, or facial expression generation, and emotional AI. So one of the most popular venues now has been just applying, connecting robots to large language models like ChatGPT or Claude to speak with the robot or to speak with an entity without having to type in the text and having this text-based communication. So there are many benefits. The interaction is much richer. It can be context-aware. compared, for instance, to old rule-based systems before generative AI. But there are many challenges so far faced in programming these types of interactions, because most of the time the interaction is possible one-on-one, one robot, one student. But once we have a group and multi-party dialogue, this becomes quite complicated. We have, for instance, done one study where we developed an application for job interview, and we applied this robotic head, fur head. So the idea here was that students learn something in the course, and then before they take an exam, they go through a job interview with a robot as a way of preparing for an exam and kind of demonstrating what they learned in the course. And this was quite a successful endeavor, and we used a large language model with RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. So we had some documents connected to large language model to make it less hallucinating and really sticking to the topic of what was tested in this job interview. And the solution was great. We tested, as you can see, the robot, but also the simulated robot. So we had two different conditions. And in our specific study, we saw that there was not really much difference between the simulated robot and the physical robot. So as much about not conclusive research results on if the physical robot is really necessary. So our conclusion here was that you can also use virtual agents like a robot speaking on the screen, as long as they have some kind of human-like appearance. And the other way of thinking about AI and social robots is their voice generation. So this has been seen in this field of research, human-robot interaction, as one of the actually key features of robots. So when we speak to the robots, when the robot has a robotic voice, we don't actually interact with it as a social entity, but we perceive it as a mechanic technological tool. But when we equip the robot with a voice that is human-like, and now we have different opportunities of using AI to do this, then it quickly becomes a social agent. So we also did a study in a scenario where we created another training with a fur-head robot, which is a pitch training where students prepare for a pitch and they train with the robot before. And actually in this study, the voice quality of the robot appeared to be the key feature why students would choose and repeat this learning experience. And we also had two conditions. We had a male and female persona coach for the pitch training, and interesting result here was also that students chose the female persona and liked the female voice compared to the male one, which is definitely an interesting topic that we're going to look into more detail in the future. Another interesting and very important part of AI on social robots is the turn-taking. If you have interacted with a robot, maybe you have already done this experience that usually you speak and then you pause and then the robot speaks, and it somehow doesn't feel very natural because you know you have to stop. So when the robot listens, you can speak, but when the robot speaks, you cannot talk, right? So now there are many super interesting developments in this way of making the conversation more natural by using turn-taking AI-based model, so that actually you can speak, but robot still listens, and then it can speak in between. So it feels like a human conversation where we just don't listen until somebody finishes speaking. So, for instance, there's another interesting study with the fur-head robot, which applied a turn-taking GPT transformer model with this robot, and showed that this type of creating the conversational dynamics, which much more preferred and more natural to the students participating in the study compared to some baseline models without AI. So there's some promising research there too. Finally, nonverbal sounds in robots. So robots don't only speak, but also as machine they can do the other sounds, right? If they move, they can make funny sound. So there's a lot of room also for different sounds used in robots and how this can shape a situation or a learning experience, for example. It can be music, but they can be artificial sounds like mechanical, electronic beeps, and so on. So this is still quite unexplored, but we have also done some research here with the Pepper robot, with the one with the tablet. And we developed a quiz game, which is called the buzzer quiz game, because we have two teams and they have buzzers on their table. and they press the buzzer, like in the quiz everybody knows. And what we did, we trained the robot to recognize the location of the buzzer and what buzzer was pressed first. So this is how we are using the nonverbal sounds to empower the robot basically to act as a quiz master in the classroom, saying, okay, you press first, you run, you go, you answer the question. And this has been also a very popular game that we have been using in different classes. When we developed quizzes, for instance, or scenarios like this, another challenge emerges, and this is the matching of what the robot is saying with the robot movements, because this is also still difficult to do. Either we have to pre-program this, and then it's not natural and not really spontaneous. So again, here's some promising research done for motion generation in social robots using AI, so that robots can move more naturally and match what is said and be context aware in a physical room. So just two examples. For instance, there is some research doing AI algorithms to allow humans to teleoperate the robot and actually move like a human. The robot would read this and record this, and these moves can be reused for other scenarios. Or, for instance, AI models that predict how the robot would react in a social situation based on how humans actually interact in social situations. So, for example, if I come to you and I stretch my hand, you would probably stretch my hand back, and this would be learned by the system and then applied on the robot, so the robot could react in a human-like manner in a social situation without having this programmed, hard-coded for this specific application. So really interesting things developed here. And of course, for us also the question of not only the hybrid human-artificial intelligence cooperation, but hybrid human-robot artificial intelligence cooperation, if we imagine using this robot with all these different multimodal AI capabilities that would make the robots more and more human-like in their interaction with us in educational settings. So just to finish, I know the time is up. I think a good way to think about it is that robots are just one of the elements in an educational setup, and I really like about thinking about it as a sociable robot systems in education, where we have the humans, we have the robot, but we also have another technologies like AI, but also laptops, whatever technologies you have. And these are all somehow co-located, embedded systems that interact in a social space. And the question is, how do we design them? What role do we give them? And how do we equip them with AI to support us and students? Thank you very much.